I didn't plan on picking him up the first time. That's the part one keep coming back to, because if I'd been even 5 minutes later that Friday, or if the rain hadn't started coming down so hard, I would have driven right past him and none of this would have happened. It was late afternoon, that weird in-between hour when the work week officially lets go but your body still feels clenched. Fridays were my longest days, and I always took the same road home, a straight, half-empty stretch that cut past an old industrial area before feeding into the highway. It saved time. It was quiet, and, apparently, it was where fate liked to loiter. He was standing near the bus stop, no bus in sight, hoodie pulled up, rain darkening the shoulders. Thumb out. Not aggressively, just hopeful. Almost embarrassed about it. I slowed down without really deciding to. I remember thinking, I never do this. And that was true. I'm not reckless. I don't trust easily. But something about him, maybe the way he kept glancing down the road like he wasn't sure anyone would stop, made me pull over. He leaned down toward the passenger window, close enough that I noticed his eyes first. Gray. Calm. Tired, but not desperate. "Where are you headed?" I asked. He smiled, quick and grateful. Honestly, anywhere past the bridge would be a win. That was my direction. So I unlocked the door. "Get in," I said. "I'm Oscar." He hesitated for half a second, like he was weighing the risk, then opened the door and climbed in. Wet air rushed into the car with him, carrying the faint smell of rain and something clean. Soap, maybe. "Thanks," he said, pulling his hood down. His hair was darker than I'd expected, damp and curling at the edges. "I'm Scott." I nodded and pulled back onto the road. The first ride lasted maybe 12 minutes. We talked about nothing important. Traffic. Weather. How unreliable the buses had gotten since the schedule changes. He laughed easily, but there was a softness to it, like he wasn't used to being heard. When I dropped him near the bridge, he thanked me again, more earnestly this time, and jogged off toward the sidewalk. I figured that was it. But the next Friday, he was there again. Same spot, same hoodie, same tentative thumb out like he wasn't sure he deserved the help. This time, I didn't hesitate. He grinned when he saw me pull over. "I was hoping it'd be you." That should have been my first clue. From then on, it became a pattern. Every Friday, same time, same stretch of road. Sometimes it was raining, sometimes the sun was already low and blinding through the windshield, but Scott was always there. And I always stopped. We started talking more, real things, not just filler. He told me he worked warehouse shifts that kept changing without notice. I told him about my job in IT and how Fridays felt like survival rather than accomplishment. He made fun of my music choices. I made fun of his inability to remember street names. What we didn't talk about, ever, was why he didn't just take the bus anymore, or why he never mentioned friends picking him up, or why every time I asked if he wanted to exchange numbers, just in case, he'd deflect with a joke. And I didn't push. Somehow, months went by like that. Every Friday, Scott slid into my passenger seat like it was reserved for him. He'd bring coffee sometimes, pass it over with a quiet, "I figured you'd be tired." Once, he brought me a granola bar because I'd mentioned skipping lunch earlier that day. It felt intimate, in a way I couldn't quite name yet. But here's the part that still messes with my head. For 6 months, I didn't know his last name. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know if Scott was even his real name. And I didn't ask. Because somewhere along the way, those short rides became the best part of my week. Not in a dramatic movie montage way. In a quiet, grounding way. Like exhaling. He'd sit there, knee angled toward mine, hands folded loosely in his lap. Sometimes our fingers brushed when I shifted gears. Sometimes our eyes lingered a second too long before snapping back to the road. I told myself it was nothing. Then one Friday, as I slowed down and put the car in park, Scott didn't reach for the door right away. He stayed seated, staring at the dashboard. "You ever feel like," he said slowly, "some things only exist in small windows?" I glanced at him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, but his jaw tightened. "Like, if you try to stretch them into something bigger, they disappear. The rain tapped against the windshield. The moment felt heavier than the space could hold. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think I know what you mean." He nodded, finally opening the door. "Thanks for the ride, Oscar. See you next Friday." I watched him walk away, something unsettled, twisting in my chest. Because for the first time since I'd met him, I had the unmistakable feeling that whatever this was, whatever we were, it wasn't going to stay safely contained in a car much longer. The next Friday didn't feel like the others. I noticed it before I even saw him, this low, restless buzz under my skin, like my body was already bracing for something. Traffic was lighter than usual. The sky was clear, sharp blue, the kind that makes everything feel exposed. I slowed as I approached the familiar stretch, eyes instinctively scanning the sidewalk. He wasn't there. I told myself not to be stupid about it. People miss buses. Schedules change. Life happens. But I still found myself glancing at the rearview mirror after I passed the spot, a stupid, disappointed ache settling in my chest. Then I saw him. He was farther down than usual, pacing near the edge of the road, phone pressed to his ear. He looked frustrated, jaw tight, free hand raking through his hair. When he spotted my car, his face shifted instantly, relief breaking through whatever tension he'd been carrying. I pulled over. Again, he climbed in a little too fast, slamming the door harder than necessary. "Rough day?" I asked. He let out a breath, scrubbing his face with both hands. "You have no idea." I waited. I'd learned by then that Scott talked when he was ready, not before. "They cut my shift short," he said finally. Again, told me they'd call me next week. He made air quotes without smiling. "Which means they won't." "That's rough," I said, and meant more than just the words. He nodded, staring out the window. "I hate feeling like I don't exist unless I'm useful." Something about that landed heavy between us. The ride felt quieter than usual, but not awkward, just charged. Like there were things hovering in the air, waiting to be named. As we approached his usual drop-off point, I slowed down, and then didn't stop. He noticed immediately. You missed it." "I know," I said, heart starting to pound. "Do you have anywhere you need to be right now?" He turned toward me, really looked at me. Those gray eyes searched my face, cautious but curious. "No," he said. "Why?" I swallowed. "There's a coffee place a few minutes past the bridge. I was thinking, if you wanted, we could grab something, sit for a bit." I half expected him to laugh it off, or make one of his deflecting jokes. Instead, he hesitated, just long enough for doubt to creep in. Then he smiled. Soft, real. "Yeah, I'd like that." The cafe was small and mostly empty, all warm lights and chipped wooden tables. We sat by the window, steam rising from our cups, hands wrapped around ceramic like we needed the grounding. It was strange, seeing him outside the car. Like I was meeting a different version of him, less guarded, more tangible. He leaned back in his chair, stretching, hoodie riding up just enough to show a sliver of skin before he tugged it back down, suddenly self-conscious. "So," he said. "This is new," I chuckled. "Yeah, guess it is." Silence settled, but not uncomfortable, just expectant. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always," I replied. "Why do you stop?" His gaze stayed on his coffee, not on me. I mean, you didn't have to, especially not every week. I thought about it. About the way my Fridays had quietly started orbiting around that stretch of road. Around him. "I think," I said slowly, "some people make the world feel less loud. You were one of them." His breath caught. Just slightly. He looked up then, eyes searching mine. "You know, for 6 months, you never asked for my number. Or my last name." "I know. Most people would've," I shrugged. "I figured if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me." He studied me for a long moment. Then, like he was bracing himself, he said, "Scott isn't my full name." I didn't react, just waited. It's my middle name, he continued. My first name, I don't really use anymore. Why not? He exhaled slowly. Because it belongs to a version of me that stayed in places I couldn't. The words hung there, raw and unfinished. You don't have to explain, I said gently. I want to, he replied. Just not all at once, I nodded. That's okay. We talked for another hour. About music. About the dumbest jobs we'd ever had. About how strange it is to let someone see you when you've gotten used to being invisible. When we finally stood to leave, the air between us felt different. Thicker. Realer. Outside, he paused before heading toward the bus stop. Oscar, he said, can I ask you something else? Sure. Next Friday, he said, voice steady but eyes nervous. Are you still stopping? I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. Yeah, I am, he smiled back, wider this time. Good, he said, because I don't think I want this to stay small anymore. And for the first time since I'd met him, I realized I didn't either. The next Friday felt inevitable. Not rushed, not forced. Just already written somewhere I couldn't see yet. I got there early, 5 minutes early actually, which never happened. I pulled over on the shoulder near our usual spot and waited, engine idling, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. I told myself it was nothing. Just a long week, just caffeine. But my pulse gave me away. Then Scott appeared, walking instead of waiting. No hoodie this time. Just a worn denim jacket, black tee underneath. He looked lighter somehow, like he'd already made a decision before he even saw my car. He didn't stick his thumb out. He just smiled and walked straight toward me. You're early, he said as he slid into the seat. So are you. He glanced at the clock on the dash. Guess we're both breaking patterns. Maybe that's not a bad thing. He hummed in agreement, buckling his seatbelt. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. We pulled back onto the road, and for a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Not because we didn't have anything to say, because we were both listening to something else. The quiet, the engine, the awareness. I thought about what you said, he finally said. What part? About some things not staying small. He looked out the window, then back at me. I think I've been hiding inside Fridays with you. That hit harder than I expected. From what? I asked. From choosing, he said simply. I nodded. Yeah, I get that. We didn't go to the cafe this time. Instead, when we reached the bridge, I took the exit toward the river without asking. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like I was stepping onto thin ice that I wanted to crack. Scott noticed immediately. Where are we going? There's a park down there, I said. Quiet, if you'd rather not. No, he said quickly, then softer. I want to. The park was nearly empty. The river slow and dark beneath the fading sky. I parked near the trees, killed the engine. The sudden silence was loud. We sat there, facing forward, neither of us reaching for the door. This feels different, Scott said. Different good or different bad? He turned toward me fully now, knee angling in my direction. Different, honest, I swallowed. He studied my face like he was memorizing it. You know, he said, I almost didn't show up today. Why? Because if I did, I knew I'd stop pretending this was just a ride. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. And is that okay? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, slow, giving me time to pull away, and rested his hand on the center console. Palm up. Open. An invitation. I stared at it for a second that felt much longer than it was. Then I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine instantly, warm, sure. Like he'd been waiting for that exact shape. Neither of us spoke. The contact wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no sudden rush. Just relief. I should tell you something, he said quietly. Okay. My first name is Daniel, he said. I stopped using it when I left home. I squeezed his hand gently. Do you want me to use it? He thought about that. Really thought. No, he said. Not yet. Scott is who I am with you. Something in my chest softened at that. He shifted closer, our knees touching now. I could feel the heat from his leg, the faint tremor he was trying to control. "Oscar," he said, voice low, "if this crosses a line for you." "It doesn't," I said immediately. Then, more carefully, "But I don't want to rush you." He smiled at that. A real smile, vulnerable. "You don't rush me. You wait." We leaned in at the same time. The kiss was gentle, almost tentative, lips brushing first, testing. When he exhaled against my mouth, I felt it everywhere. Months of unspoken tension folded into that single point of contact. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. "Guess Fridays are ruined now," he murmured. I smiled, or upgraded. He laughed softly, and for a moment everything felt possible. But even then, especially then, I knew this was only the beginning. Because once something like this steps out of a small window and into the open, it doesn't go back quietly. And neither of us wanted it to. After that Friday, things didn't explode into something dramatic. They shifted, which somehow felt bigger. Scott, my Scott, still met me on the same stretch of road. Same time, same soft smile when he spotted my car. But now, when he got in, his knee stayed pressed against mine instead of politely angled away. Now, when we talked, there were pauses that didn't rush to be filled. And sometimes, when the light hit him just right, he'd look at me like he was still surprised I was real. We didn't kiss again right away. That was his boundary, unspoken but clear, and I respected it. What changed instead were the touches that lingered. His fingers brushing my wrist when he laughed, his shoulder leaning into mine when we sat in silence at the park. One Friday, 2 weeks later, he finally said it. "I think I'm scared," he admitted, voice quiet as we sat watching the river. "Not of you, of how easy this feels." I nodded. "Easy doesn't always mean safe." "Exactly," he glanced at me. "But I'm tired of running from things that feel good just because they don't come with instructions." That night, I drove him farther than usual. Not all the way home. He still wasn't ready for that. But closer. A different neighborhood. Residential. Lived in. As he reached for the door, he hesitated. "Can I come over next Friday?" he asked, like he was asking permission to breathe. My heart skipped. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." He smiled, relieved, and then leaned in, quick but deliberate, and kissed me again. This one deeper, confident. Then he was gone, leaving warmth behind like an echo. The following Friday, my apartment had never been cleaner. I told myself I wasn't nervous. I'd had people over before. Dates, short-lived connections, almost relationships that burned out before they even learned my middle name. But Scott felt different. Because I knew him in fragments. Because he'd grown into my routine before he grew into my space. When the knock came, my pulse jumped. He stood there with a small paper bag in his hand. "I brought takeout," he said, "in case talking gets complicated." I laughed. "You planned ahead." "I'm learning," he said. Inside, he took everything in quietly. The mismatched furniture, the half-finished bookshelf, the framed photo of me and my sister that I always forgot was so visible. "You live here," he said softly. "Yeah," I replied. "I do." He set the food down, then turned to me, suddenly serious. "I should tell you something before this goes any further," he said. I nodded. "Okay." "I didn't just leave home," he said. "I left people. A boyfriend. Friends. A version of myself that couldn't survive there." My chest tightened. "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "Because if I'm here, with you, I don't want to disappear again." I stepped closer. "You're not disappearing." His eyes shone, just a little. "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." We ate on the couch, knees touching, shoulders pressed together. At some point, he leaned his head against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. Later, when the TV played something neither of us was watching, his fingers found mine. "This is okay, right?" he asked. "More than okay," I said. We kissed slowly this time, unrushed. When he shifted closer, climbing halfway into my lap, I felt his hesitation and matched it with patience. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he smiled and said, "You know what's funny?" "What?" For 6 months, I didn't even know your last name. I laughed. Guess we were both hiding. He nodded. But not anymore. That night he stayed over. Nothing dramatic, no promises spoken aloud. Just shared warmth. Quiet breaths in the dark, his hand resting on my chest like he was anchoring himself there. As he fell asleep, he murmured, barely audible, "I'm glad you stopped." So was I, because somewhere between Fridays and small windows and a stranger on the side of the road, I'd found someone who didn't need to be rescued, just seen. And I wasn't letting him walk away unseen again. Waking up with Scott in my bed didn't feel surreal. That's what surprised me most. No panic. No mental rewind of how did this happen. Just the steady weight of his arm across my waist, his breathing slow and even, like he trusted the space he was in. Morning light slipped through the blinds, cutting soft lines across his face. Up close, he looked younger, less guarded. There was a faint crease between his brows that made me wonder how often he carried worry without showing it. I didn't move right away. At some point, he stirred, nose brushing my shoulder as he shifted. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Then they found me. "Oh," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "Hi," I smiled. "Hey." For a second, I saw it, the instinct to retreat, to question. Then he relaxed, sinking back into the pillow. "Did I stay?" he asked, like he needed confirmation. "You did," I said. "Hope that's okay." He nodded. "More than." We didn't rush the morning. Coffee brewed while he leaned against the counter in my t-shirt, bare feet on the cold tile. We talked about nothing important again, like we always did, but now there was an undercurrent, something steady and present. Before he left, he hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something weird?" he said. "I'm kind of a fan of weird," I replied. "Are you okay?" he asked carefully, with me not knowing what this is yet. I didn't answer right away. "I don't need labels," I said finally. "I just need honesty." He let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "I can do that." Then he kissed me, slow and unguarded, and left. Weeks passed. Not every Friday turned into a night together. Some stayed small again. Rides, coffee, quiet talks by the river. Others stretched into long evenings, shared dinners, lazy mornings. He started opening up in pieces, about the town he'd left, the expectations. The way loving men there had felt like something borrowed, temporary, always on the verge of being taken away. One day, he told me, staring at my ceiling, I realized I was building my entire life around not being caught. "That sounds exhausting," I said. "It was," he replied. "You're the first place I've ever stopped running." That scared me, not because I didn't want it, but because I knew how fragile firsts could be. The crack came on a Friday. I almost didn't stop. Work ran late. Traffic was brutal. I told myself he'd understand if I missed 1 week. But when I pulled up and saw him there, standing, waiting, phone in his hand, I felt something twist hard in my chest. He got in quietly. No smile this time. "What's wrong?" I asked. He stared straight ahead. "I got an offer." My grip tightened on the wheel. "That sounds like a good thing." "Out of state," he added. "Better pay. Real stability." Silence filled the car. "And?" I asked carefully. "And I don't know what to do," he said, finally turning to me. "Because every time I imagine leaving, I picture you stopping for someone else." That hurt more than I expected. "I don't replace people," I said softly. He nodded. "I know. That's what scares me." We parked by the river again, the place that had become our truth zone. "I won't ask you to stay," I said. "But I won't pretend this doesn't matter either." He looked at me then, eyes bright but steady. "I don't want to make another decision out of fear," he said. "Not staying, not leaving." I reached for his hand. "Then don't decide tonight." He squeezed my fingers. "Will you still stop next Friday?" I smiled, even though my chest ached. "Yeah, I will." He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine, breathing me in like he was memorizing the moment. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a ride anymore, and neither of us was pretending it was. The week between that conversation and the next Friday felt longer than all the months before it combined. Scott didn't disappear, but he pulled back just enough for me to notice. Texts still came, but slower. Shorter, like he was rationing himself, afraid of getting too used to the sound of my voice. I didn't chase. I didn't retreat either. I figured if this thing between us was real, it could survive a little quiet. Friday came anyway. It always did. I left work on time for once, drove the familiar route, heart thudding harder with every mile. Part of me was bracing for the worst, that he wouldn't be there, that the decision had already been made without me. But he was. Same spot, same denim jacket, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders tense. When he saw my car, his face softened in a way that made my chest ache. He got in and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath all day. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he replied, quieter than usual. We drove in silence for a bit, the city sliding past like it always had. It felt strange how normal everything looked when my insides were anything but. "I turned it down," he said suddenly. I glanced at him. "The job?" he nodded. "This morning." I didn't say anything right away. Didn't want to say the wrong thing. Didn't want him to think I was celebrating a sacrifice I hadn't asked for. "I realized something," he continued. "Every time I imagined leaving, I felt relief. But every time I imagined staying, I felt steady." I swallowed. "Scott, I'm not staying for you," he said quickly, meeting my eyes. "I'm staying because I want to see what it's like to build something instead of escaping with it." That cracked something open in me. I pulled into the park without thinking, shut off the engine. The air felt electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. "I don't need promises," I said carefully. "I don't need guarantees. I just need to know you're choosing this, not hiding in it." He reached for me, both hands this time, holding my face gently, like I might vanish if he didn't. "I'm choosing you," he said, not forever, not blindly, just honestly. I leaned into his touch. That's enough. The kiss that followed wasn't tentative. It wasn't rushed either. It was deep, grounding, like both of us finally stepping forward at the same time. Later, stretched out on the hood of my car, staring up at the darkening sky, he laughed softly. "You know what's weird?" he said. "What?" "I spent half a year getting into your car without knowing your last name." He turned toward me. "Oscar Miller," he said slowly, like he was testing the words. "Feels real now," I smiled. "Daniel," I replied. He blinked. "You said." "I know," I said. "But you don't have to hide that part with me." His throat bobbed. He nodded once. "Okay." That night, he didn't go back to the bus stop. He came home with me. And for the first time since I'd picked up a stranger on a rainy Friday, the future didn't feel like something rushing at us from opposite directions. It felt like a road we were finally driving together. It didn't turn into some perfect, cinematic ending. No swelling music. No dramatic declarations in the rain. It turned into something better. Scott, Daniel when he let himself be, started staying over more often. Slowly at first, a toothbrush appearing next to mine. His jacket draped over the back of my chair like it had always belonged there. Friday rides became optional, but we still took them sometimes, just to laugh about how absurd the whole thing had been. 6 months, he said once, shaking his head. "I trusted you with my silence before I trusted you with my name." "I think you trusted me exactly the right way," I replied. We learned each other in the small, unglamorous moments. Him humming while doing dishes. Me waking up earlier than necessary just to watch him sleep. The way he still flinched at certain questions, and the way he relaxed when he realized I wasn't going anywhere. One Friday, months later, we drove past the old spot by the road. He looked out the window, thoughtful. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped?" I smiled faintly. "I think about it more than I should." He reached over, lacing his fingers with mine. "I don't." "No?" "No," he said firmly. Because you did stop, and I got in, and we didn't rush it. That matters. We pulled over anyway, not because we needed to, but because we wanted to remember. Standing there together, wind brushing past us, Scott, Daniel, turned to me. You know, he said, for a long time I thought love had to be loud to be real, that if it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't worth risking. And now? I asked. And now, he said softly, I think love can be a car door opening. The same place, every Friday. Someone choosing to notice you. I wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. We still don't have everything figured out. We still argue sometimes. He still gets scared. I still overthink. But we meet each other in it, without hiding, without shrinking things down to survive. Every now and then, when a stranger stands by the side of the road, thumb out, Scott glances at me. You stopping? He asks. I always smile before I answer. Only once, I say. Already did. And that's the truth. Because some rides don't end when you reach the destination. Some of them change the direction of everything that comes after.